Hi, everyone. This is Marilyn Bradford, and I would like to welcome you to my Left Turn podcast. What is your left turn? Writing a blog, parenting in a different way, letting go of the old because you are aware of something greater. Left turns are choices we can all make. It's about a willingness to step into the unknown in any area of your life, to trust yourself, to risk creating or trying something new. It's about letting your true uniqueness shine. The greatest people who have lived, artists, statesmen, writers, explorers, musicians, have all been people willing to turn left. What capacities do you have that you have not acknowledged? What would your life and the world be like if you were willing to turn left? Welcome, everyone, to this edition of Left Turn. I'm Marilyn Bradford, and I'm very happy to have with me today as a guest, Pam Houghteling. Pam is a creator of magnitude with systems. She's the one people go to for dealing with difficult people, and beyond and beyond and beyond. She's also a mom and has a regular family, an extended family, and a family of chosen people. And so I'm very happy today to talk with her about family and what does left turn mean to her in terms of family. So welcome, Pam.
Hi, Marilyn, and everybody listening. Thank you for having me here.
I'm excited. So left turn is, all about when we do something kind of different, when we don't follow what's prescribed by this reality. Marry at this age, have 2.2 kids, do this, be a mom this way, all of that. So I would love for you to just begin talking about what you did buy from this reality a long time ago, if you bought anything, and what left turns have been for you in terms of parenting and family and all of that.
Well, it's interesting because the first thing that popped into my head is very different than the more obvious stuff that I might have talked about with you. And that is, so I was married to this, awesome guy named Warren, and was not someone, first of all, who ever thought I'd get married, and then what I'm thinking of is I never thought I'd get married, never thought I'd have kids. And each of those changes came about from me being and choosing what works for me. And I've never thought of it that way until you asked that question.
Yeah.
Because it's in general, you grow up kind of thinking, okay, I'm gonna grow up, I'm gonna find somebody, I'm gonna have some kind of relationship, and that's the target in some way. And for me, it wasn't, because I had a very, let's call it a troubled childhood, where I had a lot of anxiety and depression and being suicidal and stuff like that, and had found my way through that to being a very whole, happy, well-adjusted person. So I didn't feel like I needed anybody else to make myself complete. It was, so when I met Warren, it was just infinite being A and infinite being B meeting up and enjoying each other and wanting to share our lives together. So to me, it's almost from the very beginning, we went about things very differently than a lot of people I knew. We would have what we called state of the marriage conversations, which was, hey, how's it going? Is this working for you? Is this working for me? What would we like our life together to be? And then we'd shift and change things. And when, like I said, I didn't ever think I was going to have kids. And I went to visit my sister after she had a baby. And it ended up, I was amazing with this baby, and I loved this baby. And, it was oh, this is something I could have in my life, not because this is what you do, but because it was bringing me joy. So then I did go down the road of, having kids and everything. And Warren and I had a very, I don't know, to me, it was a very supportive, caring, communicating relationship, and went through, you know, all kinds of things over the years together that were amazing. But also, we had, when we had gotten together, we were both going through trauma, like actual PTSD from massive things. And so we were there for each other in that trauma. And, you know, as I started, you know, being someone who didn't have that particular trauma, it was like, who are we together? Like, if we're not having to save each other and we're not having to, you know, so we had to find our way through that as well, of the relationship changing from what it started as to something different. And we got to where we weren't together because we were married. We were together because we chose it every day. You know, he had his kind of path he was doing. I was, you know, using the tools of access consciousness a lot. And so we didn't have this point of view that we're married, so that's it. It was, what are we creating our family as? What are we creating our relationship as? And honestly, one day about, you know, I don't know, 20 years after we got together, we had a conversation and we were like, hey, you know, for the first time, asking questions, being married wasn't the thing for either of us. And in a 5-minute conversation, we were like, let's change it. Let's not be married anymore. And so then so when you say left turn, that's a definite left turn.
I want to stop you
something that most people don't do.
You did quote the things that this reality says you should do, but you did them from a completely different space. I just love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So I just want to interject that.
Yeah, because I always think of it as that conversation we had was the big left turn, but until you had asked me about this, like the whole thing was not kind of following along, even though the outside looked the same as everybody else.
Yes.
How we went about it was very different.
Very different.
And so we chose to not be married anymore, and we talked for an hour and a half about what would that look like, how do we do it, and how do we not make each other wrong? Because as soon as you start saying you're separating as a couple, everybody's projecting, oh, something must be wrong. You know, either they're not getting along, or because we had this amazing relationship. And then we still did. We just did it from 2 different houses. And, you know, with a focus more on parenting than being a couple. And, you know, one of the ways I thought of it is we're all still a family. It just looks different than it did at first. Cool. And that continued until he died.
Yeah. That's very cool. So how would you talk about your family of origin versus family of choice? Where are your left turns in terms of that? Or,
well, I'd say family of origin is where the baggage is. Like, Marilyn and I have known each other for many years, and many's the time that I've called her from vacationing with Warren and my kids and my family of origin for some facilitation. It's interesting because even before I got introduced to the tools of access, I was doing a lot of work for myself on clearing and changing my relationship with my family, you know, the members of my family of origin. We grew up in a family where there was like a long line of alcoholism and, you know, certain kinds of patterns of interacting and stuff like that. And I was someone who would go off and do like all kinds of like spiritual and self-help and therapy and, you know, just anything to change what wasn't working for me. And what I found was the moment I would be with my family of origin, I would go right back into the shit, honestly. And it was, you know, even when I was an access consciousness facilitator and using these tools all the time and having so much space everywhere, man, family stuff is where it can still stick you so bad, you know, whether it was judging myself for my parenting and, you know, and getting tied up in knots there, or going and seeing my family. What I tended to do is just avoid them. honestly. Like,
Ah,
see them for a few days if I was going to see them, and usually, that was something I could keep up with. But we have this kind of traditional place we vacationed as a family, and a few years ago, it was actually during COVID, I went to this cabin to be by myself at a time of year nobody else usually goes. Honestly, so I could attend an access class online and be on my own, because you couldn't really go a lot of places, but I could go there. And it was the first time I'd ever been there without any of my family. And I found I am a completely different person in
wow.
Maine, which is where it was located. There was, extended family, like second cousins and great aunts and that kind of stuff there in their own places. And I enjoyed seeing them, and I realized how much I sat back, stayed quiet, and just didn't show up when my, parents and siblings were around. So that was a real eye opener.
Mhm.
And that was after years of working on all this stuff.
Well, and you mentioned one word with your family that just sticks out, which was judgment.
Yeah.
And that is such a huge part of most of our families of origin, is that we're judged for not doing this or doing this or this or that or that. And I know you to be a person who you really don't judge much. I mean, it's incredible. It's like, oh, Pam, wow, it's kind of cool. So, has that been a big left turn for you from the beginning of just going about your life with more awareness and less judgment? Because awareness and judgment can't coexist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, because when I was a kid, I had this like an amazing, well, I still do have an amazing aunt. And the way we talked about it is, my family is a family of doers, which is, you might seem funny, because you know me as someone who
Yes, you are a
accomplishes
doer.
a lot.
You accomplish a lot.
Right. But my aunt and I were beers. Like, we would go sit under a tree and
Wow.
just be there. And, and it's like, that was, so I was always very different than the rest of my family. And there were just a few key people in my life who, like, acknowledged that and let me know that's awesome as well. Like, you can be very different from your family. And, like I said, I had a lot of anxiety and depression. Now I know that was me being aware of a lot of
Right.
people's stuff and not having the tools to kind of know what's mine and what's not. But I was like a little magnet picking up, or a receiver picking up all this stuff from everybody, and really not knowing what to do with it. And so that idea of being, and that you can choose how you be, and that makes a difference,
Mhm.
was something I found early on. And that is a big part of what helped me to, whether it's being around my family, or one time I was in a work situation. It was my first like big full-on social work job after graduate school. And the man who ran the agency was honestly a complete asshole, and liked like dominate all over the place and give people hard times. And um my agreement when I was hired, if you don't know social work, you need supervision for a few years and that kind of thing. And it was to include all that. And so he called me in, and he was like, you guys need to do your supervision outside of office hours, and on your own time, and you need to pay her for it, and blah blah blah. And I was like, no, that is not the condition under which you hired me. And he tried to guilt me in so many ways and make me so wrong and I was just I was like, this is actually what you said when you hired me. And I didn't fight him. I didn't have to.
Cool.
I could just let him go do all his things. And I just kept being like, yeah, no, actually, this is what you said. And finally he said, okay. And he never, in the 2.5 years I worked there, he never gave me any trouble. Whereas everybody else, you'd like call in and yell at them and do all this stuff. And it was like, you know, you can be an energy that no one can abuse you, that, you know, people, and as I'm saying that, I'm like, and it's still so hard when I go to my family of origin. So
Right.
Marilyn, what's that about?
Well, it's interesting. It's your family of origin has known you from birth. It's so that it's very easy for them to suck you back into all of their rules, their projections, expectations, rejections, separation, judgments, and conclusions. It's like, it's so strong. I'm here. And they're like, and you're like, oh, what happened? So, I mean, that's pretty true for everybody. You
Yeah.
developed ways and you have patterns. You know, we have essential, I don't know too much about the brain, but neurological patterns and pathways for all kinds of things. And these are the oldest pathways and neurological patterns you have to respond to the family in this way, to be this kind of person, it just activates all of those old pathways. So it's can be really crazy. But I love that story with the supervisor. That's awesome. So I know that you moved to Los Alamos at some point, and you've created families of choice over the years. Some maybe still work, some maybe don't. I don't know, but would you talk about that, please?
Sure. Yeah. And you know, I love what you said about like all the projections and expectations with family, because that's it. It's like, here you are being whoever you're being, and you walk into this box of what they think you are and how you've always interacted with them. And, you know, and it's this disconnect of, or a gap in who you're being and who they think you are. So anyway, that was very helpful. So when we moved to Los Alamos, God, now it's probably 22 years ago, and had come out to visit some people who are like parents to me, and loved it out here. Energetically, we were both within 3 days. We were like, let's move here. Now it took us a year and a half to actually move there. But a big part of it was we loved the area, but also there was built-in family, which was, and again, family of choice, meaning people we could be ourselves with and enjoy and stuff like that. And we were here for many, many, many years, and we'd do, you know, Christmas together and birthdays and all that kind of stuff. Well, then I got introduced to Access Consciousness, and I started changing a lot. I mean, I've always been someone who engages in things in a way to change everything that's not working, or where I'm limiting myself and what I can be more in the world. But the Access tools just, like, you know, exponentialize all that. And it honestly got to where I was changing so much that the family of choice was like the family of origin, in that they didn't know who I was or what to do with me. And, you know, and I was kind of more, again, it was easier to separate, meaning, you know, instead of just going over and hanging out for the fun of it, I was getting together with them for the family occasions, and not intentionally. I never sat and went, oh, I'm not going to do this. It was just, it was just easier. And then actually all that started changing about a year and a half ago. I realized, because, you know, Warren had died several years ago, and I realized I'd kind of been hermiting since he died. So I was like, okay, time to change that. And I moved to the center of town instead of the outskirts, and started running into people and, you know, getting together for coffees and stuff like that. And I was able to be with my family of choice in a different way. I didn't cut myself off or dampen down who I was being to make them comfortable. I was like, and part of this was I had been planning to move to a different state, and then I chose not to, and I bought a house here again. And so I basically made the choice to be here in the town where I'm living, and that played out in terms of in a lot of different ways. And with that family of choice, it's like I'm being me with them no matter what. I'm not letting the projections and expectations, because before it was like I need to not be around them to be me, whether it was my family of origin or the family of choice, like where things ended up. And it was like, no, I'm going to be me no matter what.
Right.
And so now I can just engage with them, fully, and they're all coming over tonight for 4th of July and everything. Anyway, and I haven't been in person with my family of origin since COVID started, but I think now I would be in a very different way with them than I have been before.
How would that look? What would that be to be different with them?
Well, I think I do like I am with my family of choice, where I'm not giving myself up just to make it easy around them. There's some really cool access tools that are coming out recently that make that so much easier.
Yes, we don't have to save or rescue or dumb ourselves down or anything.
Yes, exactly.
And I'm also trained as a clinical social worker. So Pam and I know that whole, you're here to help people and save the world. What if that's not true?
Yeah.
That's very cool. And you're really transitioning into another family, not path, but time in a way, because your youngest daughter's about to turn 21 and she's in college, and your son is that everybody's going to be on their own basically. So how is that for you?
Oh, it's awesome. I'm loving it. It's, again, it's that thing of when, if you, I know people whose kids are growing up and going off to college and they're devastated because their whole life is about their kids.
Yes.
And then if their kid's not there, then they don't have a life.
Right.
For me, like, not that I'm able to be this all the time. Marilyn knows, because I call her, I'm like, help, facilitate me. But in a large extent, like, I've been creating my life with my kids, not for my kids, which is what some people do, not like against my kids, like I'm going to do whatever I want, to hell with the kids. It's and so when Lily started going off to school, it's just, there's more space. I can I found myself kind of getting to things in a different way, because I was used to having built-in companionship, and then that's gone, and there's more space to do some of the things I'd like to create. But I made a very conscious choice of, like, I'm used to having her to interact with during the day, and she's going to be gone. So any interaction is going to come from me reaching out to people and being involved in my community and stuff like that. So I started, just looking around for things to be doing, but not from, oh, I'm going to be so lonely. Just from it. Well, it's like when Warren and I changed our family. Our family's changing. And so my daily life is changing, because I'm not going to be as focused on stuff to do with my kids, but I don't have that as a loss. To me, that's a contribution, because it's anytime anything changes, it's a chance to be you in the world in a different way, and to try different things and change things up. Well, I love changing things up.
Yes, amazing.
Whether it's looking around and going, let's trade rooms, and move all the furniture around, or change where I'm living, or any kind of change.
So if you would have anything to tell people who are feeling stuck in family? What would you say?
Yeah.
What would you?
Well, I'd come back to what you were, we were talking about before of judgment.
Yeah.
It's like anything you can do to get out of judgment of you and out of judgment of them, because there's so much with family that's, the expectation, this is how it is, this is how we do things, this is who I have to be with them, this is who I'm expecting them to be with me. Like it goes both ways. I've got my little slots I put my family into of who they are and how they be. So what if instead of that, one is be in question. What's possible with this family event today? How much fun can I have? If I weren't getting caught up in the family trauma drama, what would I choose? How would I be? What would I be aware of? So when you're in question like that, like different new possibilities can show up that haven't shown up before. And then kind of when you go into judgment, all that possibility and question goes away. It's
Yes.
you're in reaction to, they always do this, I always do this. They do say that, I feel this way. I do this, they choose, they react. That's it's like a cycle of reactions that you've grown up with, and that you're kind of you can either tap into it and be stuck in it and have a miserable or, okay or fun, however it is for you, time with your family. Or you can, use some of the different tools that I use, access tools. You might do other things, whether it's you step outside and be aware of the earth and have some space and then go back in, or, maybe you meditate. I use a lot of these tools that help you get out of judgment and be aware and receive and not go into reaction. And then that allows it to be a new possibility and not just the way it's always been with your family. And I can tell you a story, Marilyn. Well, I know you've heard this, but my mother-in-law was not the most easy person in the world. And she would completely out of the blue, like you never knew when it was going to hit, she would blow up and be quite, an intensely angry person. And one time, and this was right after I'd started learning access tools, and we were all having dinner at her house, and I think my son was like 7, something like that. And he was happy to see me. And at the dinner table, he and I were talking a lot. And I think, whatever it ticked off in my mother-in-law, I think she felt left out or something, but she basically lit into my son about how rude he was for, only talking to me or something. And usually I would have so fought back for, I used to, in my head, I'd be like, oh God, if she'd only be different, and I can't believe she's like this. And, if she'd die, life would be so much easier, that kind of thing. And I had none of that. I was just like, oh my God, it's so interesting that this is what she's choosing.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, like there's so many possibilities for us in this evening, and she's choosing to go to this anger thing. And I had no point of view about it, and it lasted 30 seconds.
Wow.
Because there was no fight. There was no, usually it's like this person's saying this and this person's reacting, and they're reacting back and forth, and it escalates. And if you have no judgment and are in allowance, which is not a doormat. It doesn't mean, oh, I let her yell at me for 10 minutes. No, I just had no point of view that she should be different. Why is she doing this? But it was just like, wow, that's so interesting to me. And she couldn't go anywhere with it, and it died. So
that's a great story. Yes, yeah. Really. On how we feed the past, the projections, expectations by reacting. No point of view, they can't do anything. So
yeah,
that's a wonderful example. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's the thing. It's like family is like this hotbed of reactions and projections and patterns, and maybe not the most fun thing in the world, but you can change that for you. It might not change anything for them, but you can change it for you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Pam. I think you've given people a lot to consider and be aware of, and possibilities for changing how they behave and being more of them. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so much for joining this episode of Left Turn. I wonder what embracing left turns could create in your life. What magical possibilities might show up. Remember, when you choose left turns, you are joining a group of the most creative and brilliant people the world has ever known.